No Password Required is a presentation of Cyber Florida, located on the Tampa campus of the University of South Florida.
Hello, I'm Bill McQueen. Today we have part 2 of our special edition of No Password Required, recorded at Florida Cyber Conference 2019 in Tampa. In part 1, our expert panel shared secrets on how to promote cybersecurity in the C-suite. In today's episode, the panel offers solutions to the growing need for trained cybersecurity professionals. Here is moderator Mark Clancy, Chief Information Officer for Sprint.
I was talking to one of Andy's peers a couple years ago, who's a CISO, a large Wall Street financial firm, and he said one thing that struck me that was interesting, which is he spends 60% of his time talking to his company's clients. Why? Because they had tremendous experience in cybersecurity and all the clients wanted to hear it, and they actually viewed it as a business value add when they're working investment banking deal, we can advise on X, Y, and Z. So my question for the panel in that spirit is, what can the big guys do to help the little guys? Somebody here might have helped me with this question, but maybe I'll start with Terry, just randomly.
This is one of my aha moments about a year and a half ago when we did a marketing study that basically said that businesses aren't going to do anything unless they've had an event or they have a contract at risk or they're enabled. So I started thinking through it, and honestly, small and mid-sized businesses, the way I define that is they don't have CIOs, they don't have CISOs, which actually can get pretty big, by the way. I have worked with a billion-dollar global company that had an IT director, and that was it, okay? What they need to be enabled means the big guys have to help. So the banks and the insurance companies have to provide them some kind of level of cyber risk step-off. And I can go into specifics with anybody of what that could mean. And for the defense industrial base, it has to be the primes. So the prime contractors in the defense industrial base have to help. I tried to set this up at my last company, but they didn't like the idea. But I thought since we had a world-class SOC, that we could provide services to our small and mid-sized business partners. And so I think it's those kinds of initiatives, and I think there should be incentives, right, to get them there. But I would pay a little security fee on my small business bank loan if it came with, protection for me. Or a stepping off point. So I think the big guys have to step in.
Completely agree, and I think there's multiple benefits. Honestly, it can be a competitive advantage, and we certainly look at that from that perspective in talking to our clients. So we have 8,000 financial advisors. They have clients with insecurities, pardon the pun, around the topic of cyber. Great. Well, let's show that trust relationship between that advisor and that client is even stronger, because they can reach back to us and we can talk to that client. We can come and do a client presentation. And so often that bleeds into questions and comments and follow-ups around small and medium-sized businesses as well. Oftentimes the client is also, a business owner. But I agree, beyond that, between physical supply chain and information supply chain, we're all probably only, 3 or 4 degrees of separation from everybody else. So the attitude, as Mark well knows because he was one of the pioneers of this, of information sharing and financial services, is now fundamental to every person to have my job. We are all part of the same ecosystem, and let's share what we know. And frankly, bruises, bumps, scar tissue that large firms, have learned from, let's share that with smaller firms. Because if there's a weak community bank out there, if there's a credit union that doesn't have a CISO yet, let's not wait for them to have a problem that might frankly affect, everyone else. Let's, lift them up. Let's share. And so that's very powerful in financial services. I think we could be doing more of that. Now, maybe what I'd say to the audience is, don't wait for someone to show up and offer. Ask, right? Ask. I think the answer you're going to get is absolutely. What would you like to know? What could we share? What resources do we have? because they may not have thought of you as someone who could benefit, but I would guess they'd be willing to share.
So I like the idea of being forward-leaning. So I do think that if your company is forward-leaning and is thinking, hey, how can we partner in a way that shows that we want to mitigate risk to a point that we're a stronger business partner, right? The same way that we looked at like 5 years ago, where board of directors of the Fortune 500 companies were looking more closely at CISO resumes before a company hired them. So the board of directors wanted to approve their resumes, so they knew that the company had someone that actually was a thought leader. He or she is a thought leader to really take their company forward. So with your company today, if you're in the industry today, being forward-leaning and saying, what can I do? One thing I would take a look at is for the defense side, and I know it's on also in the other sectors, for the federal acquisition regulations, there's the defense federal acquisition regulations, the DFARS. Right now there's a mandatory kind of minimum standard that you have to demonstrate your compliance with. So you have to have a compliance program in place that demonstrates that you meet that standard with respect to cybersecurity. That can be daunting, right? Dealing with the federal government is daunting in and of itself, but then adding a whole layer of demonstration of compliance with cybersecurity regulations is almost a whole new level, right? So there are programs out there now where there's a Department of Defense mentor protege programs where someone will bring you in and kind of help sponsor you to get into that cybersecurity compliance, check that box, and then you can then partner, right? 4 degrees of separation. You want to be able to know who you're partnering with, that they're secure, that they understand the risks that they're subjecting not only their own company to, but everyone else that they're doing business with. You don't want to be the weakest link. So I think there's a lot of opportunities out there to say, hey, I want to continue to do a good job. I want my company to expand and succeed and keep our nation safe. Look to others that already have those successes and ask them to really bring you along with them, exactly with what you just heard from my colleagues, because we're all here together.
Great. And just to echo your comment about the board's involvement, so when I came over to Sprint, my last interview was with a board member who just happened to be a former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Admiral Mullen. No pressure. Yeah, there you go. So you know what I was dealing with. And I think the executive level has realized that this is a business risk issue. What they haven't realized is how to fully translate what that risk is to the business they run, right? So maybe we can talk about that sort of theme in education of how do you cyberize the CEO, right? How do you get them to understand the cyber exposure in the context of the way they think they run their business? Because I can tell you for me, it's the P&L, not the red, yellow, green chart.
So one of the things we do is walk through with them what we call is a cyber risk profile. But it's basically, what is we want to protect the revenue and the reputation of your business, right? That resonates with them. And so we want to look at the linkages and dependencies that you have to the digital world that impact most your revenue and your reputation. And then you prioritize those, right? So if you sell retail via your website, then, if your website were down for 48 hours, that would have a big impact to both your reputation, right? Because then everybody knows that your website's down, and to your revenue because you're not selling anything. And so by mapping those risks to your revenue and reputation, then they go, and by the way, then you can try to quantify that. And there's some companies that do that, like RiskLens and others, where they can say, okay, if your website's down for 48 hours, it's going to cost you $1.2 million, right? And that could potentially kill me if I'm a smaller business, kind of thing. So mapping it to business impact is the wake-up call for them, I have found.
I'll just add, rather than repeating a different version of that, because I think that's extremely insightful. Back to a theme I said before, though, I at lunch saw a couple French officers, no doubt, probably from CENTCOM or SOCOM out here, and they were eating lunch, and that maybe stereotypical American thing that if they don't understand me, I'll yell louder, or I could learn how to speak French, right? Or like, which would be the better, tactic? So what I would do is sort of check myself and think, how well educated am I to talk to that business executive in his or her language versus how am I going to educate them in my language, right? Which will be more effective? You better have contextual situational awareness about that business executive's job, about their goals, about their P&L, about their business goals, or organizational goals, right? Expanded beyond business, or you're not going to be able to speak to them. You're going to have an extremely difficult time in that educational process. So, look inward, look to yourself, and think about, how could I be better prepared to have that conversation?
So I guess I'll take a quick twist on that, on cyberizing the CEO to cyberizing the principal. So the National Security Agency has a mission, a national mission that we really want to support, and that is just increasing cyber awareness across all 50 states, and doing that from the kindergarten level all the way up. So how do you actually get children interested at a very early age? They have to be exposed to it. Well, they're exposed to an iPad at a year. Some of these kids at 12 months can manipulate an iPad, but learning then what goes beyond, what goes inside that iPad, and how does it actually come together? So what we've been doing within the Department of Defense, with the National Security Agency, is we've been working with a lot of the states. We're now very active in Gen Cyber, as well as Centers for Academic Excellence, in trying to get schools adopting cybersecurity curriculum at the lower grade levels, as well as the higher grade levels, up through the college.
You're listening to No Password Required.
This is Bill McQueen. We now return to our special edition of No Password Required, recorded at the Florida Cyber Conference 2019 in Tampa.
Cyberizing the Principal. And I think that's where what we heard from Andy with respect to understanding the lingo, explaining to them in very real terms what is it in it for their school, for their county, and for their state, and how can they actually make a difference. So in 2018, California lost $214 million from cybercrime. So those principals in the state of California are recognizing, it goes to the very pocketbooks or the purses or the wallets of the parents of my students. And how can we kind of invest in changing or adding maybe to a mathematics component, part of the mathematics curriculum, adding to it some cybersecurity understanding, technology, adding to the science piece, increasing part of the technology in a science class. How do we actually increase that? Just the awareness of cybersecurity, and then start developing a basic cyber hygiene at a really, really early level, so that we don't, as a country, have one state losing that much money in 1 year to cybercrime. I mean, we're all paying the price, right? So this is a marathon, right? In terms of our country getting ourselves together. So I appreciate what my colleague said with respect to understanding the business risk, then also understanding, talking the lingo. And I think that's where we pull in the educational piece at a very early age across all 50 states. And I wanted to let you know, I was looking at my notes and I did the math wrong. So I said the Constitution was signed in 1789. That was 230 years ago, not 300 years ago. So I know there's mathematicians in this group.
We didn't call you on it, it's okay. As long as you have your Windows 2003 out of the environment, it's all good. So we talked about this throughout the day, that cybersecurity is a team sport. And so in that spirit, what can we do in the public-private partnership? And maybe in that specifically, what's sort of the interest of government in helping the private sector secure its networks? And maybe we'll start with you, Denise. Reverse the order up, keep it going.
So what can the government do to share to public-private partnership? So if you think about it, the United States, as I was saying, like with your local MVA where you'd go and get your driver's license, it may have been a standalone system at one point, but now everything is connected. So here you have the United States government interconnected with everybody with respect to cloud services, shared services, technologies, all the different components. We can't anymore just make everything ourselves, right? Which you used to call the old GOTS model. The government created it from scratch. So we recognize as there's a business risk, like Terry was saying, there's a business risk to the government if we don't think of it more holistically. And I think that's what you heard from General Nakasone this morning, and you heard from Ms. Ann Neuberger talk about the public-private partnership. So what are we doing in that regard? We're recognizing that we have to share more information at on the cyber intelligence information, but we also have to share lessons learned of what we're doing. We also have to recognize that our employees, our greatest assets, our talent, have to be able to transition between different sectors, have to be able to transition between academia, government, and industry, and just to kind of keep learning and keep upskilling and become the better experts. So I think it's recognizing that we can't just be like, oh, this is the world that I'm in. No, actually, this is the world that we're in. No, we are all in this together. And I think that's a new awakening for our country, is really recognizing that this is for the United States to maintain its innovation edge, the edge that we have. We all have to come together in a way that's dramatically different.
So I'm going to sound a little bit negative. I've been hearing about private-public partnerships for the past 20 years, and I haven't seen dramatic progress. I have seen small initiatives that are pointed to. I am ever hopeful about what Ann Neuberger discussed this morning about the NSA Cybersecurity Directorate. But having been in government, industry, and academia, I actually believe that you need a nonprofit interlocutor between government and industry to scale partnership. I was a part of it at Carnegie Mellon. I think that UARCs and FFRDCs, and I prefer that they're aligned with a university, because I think a university keeps the ideas and the research, right, and the engagement and the conversation fresh. And so when I hear something like they want to start a new nonprofit to do the cybersecurity maturity model certification, I'm kind of like, why not establish a UARC with a university that you're already working with, or why not use one of the ones that already exists? And how about scaling partnership in all the areas we've discussed, right? In research, in information sharing, in training and education, curriculum sharing, and I want to see it scale for once.
I'll be more optimistic. Only to the extent that, as I alluded to before, that there is so much available. If there's an opportunity to me to extend the public-private partnership or to mine that more, simply making it more clear what's available, right? Versus, I have a lot of colleagues, CISOs, are sort of always grumbling about, we're not getting, classified threat intelligence, and that's the only definition of effective public partnerships. We're like, stop wishing for that, because you're never going to get it, right? But meanwhile, look at the best practices, look at the tools, look at the educational materials that are available. Look at initiatives that come through NIST, that come through SCI, that come through DARPA. Look at the benefit that's flowing for it. To me, that's all part of the public-private partnership versus no one called me and shared, timely threat intelligence. I don't think that's the best way for the government, to help us, right? And I think the government has really improved in creating opportunities for sharing, right? So much more collaborative, not always we have the answer and let us tell you what the answer is, but, create opportunities for partners to share, of which, federal agencies play a part in the conversation, but it's not the only voice. I think that's tremendous.
So I just wanted to tap on to the conversation of comment on nonprofit interlocutor. That I think there's definitely something to say for that, because we keep hearing about zero trust and trust but verify with the old Ronald Reagan model. I think everyone does want to deal with an honest broker, and I think that could be the missing link in terms of some regard, that who is the honest broker and who can we actually come together on, so that partnership truly is a solidified partnership and we know who we're actually in the sandbox with. So I think there's something to say for that, Terry.
So, big fan. So on that theme, let me pull two things. So I had a conversation with John Felker at Homeland Security. It's running CISA. Great American, middle, ask him questions, hard questions later. But to me, one of the challenges we have is creating the muscle memory for sharing. We do it transactionally, and I gave this talk a few years ago at the FSISAC Generation 1 sharing network was at the bar. Generation 2 is email. Generation 3 is some structured data. I'm running a 5G network. I want 5th generation sharing, right? So how do we create, from the leadership level down, that institutional muscle memory to do this? And the reason I ask is every company I've worked for, when I got there, sharing of information was prohibited by the security policy.
So I was actually responsible for the DIB pilot, I'm trying to think, 2014, when we were trying to scale the sharing across the defense industrial base.
And I testified about complaining when it got shut down.
Right. And the lessons learned that came out of that was that because we couldn't do it at an unclassified level at speed, and because we didn't have that nonprofit interlocutor where we would have continuous trust, and that the 33,000 companies from across the defense industrial base could participate, right, then the impact was really limited. So unfortunately, we learned these lessons a long time ago, but we still haven't built that model. I, at the time, was recommending CMU CERT, the first CERT in the world, to be that. But we need something like that, because then they are deep in the science, deep in the knowledge, keep the knowledge base together, and everyone can interact with them at speed continuously.
Right.
I don't have much to add to that. Are there any Raymond James attorneys in the room? Okay, so look, I own the security policy. We share back. In fact, we measure how much we share back, because you're right, it's absolutely impossible. I sort of alluded to in my previous comment, sitting and waiting for the one-way information flow. Oh, I'm not sharing anything back. It doesn't work, right? So it was mentioned I was a Marine. I can barely say interlocutor versus get into the details.
Is that the
of
thing
it,
where like the
right?
water level comes up in the river?
Yes, but I do know what can I do in my organization. Promote sharing, right? Every partnership should be a bilateral, opportunity for value, and that includes whether we've shared information with government agencies that, wow, that's really interesting. Thanks for sharing.
But wouldn't we like to know that it's all coming together somewhere?
For sure.
Like, that's my stretch goal. Like, that from government, industry, and academia, at least in the U.S., that it's all coming together somewhere.
Well, I think it's all coming together in environments like this, because there was a void, right? We didn't actually have an environment where we could actually come together. So I think I think it's powerful, honestly, that all 50 states are saying, what can we do? How can we share? And how can we come together, start thinking creatively in a way that doesn't diminish your competitive advantage? If you are a company, how do you protect intellectual property, but also maintaining and shoring up your defenses? So I think there's a lot of value in meeting with your colleagues across the different sectors, but in a way that you can think strategically and just think big picture. And I think you have to juxtaposition that with the workforce, that's the talent that's coming into the workplace today. A lot of them, were born after 9/11 or have no recollection of that. They're born after 9/11, and they don't have that muscle memory necessarily. And so it's incumbent upon, I think, the leaders and the veterans in the field to use that muscle memory and to think strategically and start coming together as a unit.
You're listening to No Password Required.
This is Bill McQueen. We now return to our special edition of No Password Required, recorded at the Florida Cyber Conference 2019 in Tampa.
Well, I think, Mark, you're absolutely right. The establishment of muscle memory is the key. And to Terry's point about having some sense that there is indeed a place where that comes together, we aren't there yet. But I think we are on the path to getting there. I'm not sure the right path, but I think probably you may have all heard it at Ann's talk earlier today, some of the things they're trying to do in conjunction with what we're trying to do. But one of the big things in that challenge is classified versus unclassified. And I think we, as a government, have to get out of this mode of it has to be classified to be worth anything. because there's a ton of stuff out there, and I see it every day,
Yeah.
that isn't classified, that's coming from the commercial sector, and that's just as relevant and important. And you, by the way, you can use it right now as there is coming from the classified side.
Great. Oh,
And
thanks.
back to fundamentals, right? If every network in the United States was leveraging what's available unclassified, we'd be
in great
golden,
shape.
right? So rather than saying, well, where's the classified stuff? Like, well, okay, how about you work with what you have right now, and you'd be so much better off.
Okay. Final question, two-parter for each of you. What's the most interesting, amazing thing you heard today? And what's the thing you're most surprised you didn't hear today at the conference? And maybe in the last session, because there's one session after us, but we'll start with you, Terry.
Frankly, Ann Newberger's conversation, as someone who's been in the national security arena for 40 years, I have not heard as much information in our space, initiatives that are on point ever before from that agency that I have worked with forever. So I was really impressed when I first heard that they were standing it up. I was kind of like, oh, so Information Assurance Directorate, Back to the Future kind of thing. But I think they are taking a very updated approach. I will say that I want them to partner with university UARCs and FFRDCs so that they can scale all the amazing work that they're doing. But I am very excited about the potential of that.
Right. What did you not hear that you expected to hear today? What were we silent on? What did we miss?
I think we're always missing very focused solutions that we can act on together now. You know, I want sign up here, do this, play in this. Because as someone who's been listening to all of this for a very long time, I worry when the conversation is circular.
Andy?
I was going to say Ann's comments, but I'll pick another one. For the positive, Florida Attorney General talking so specifically about cybercrime, fraud, the impact on the elderly in our state, and not accepting, being number one in the wrong category. So she fired me up, and immediately, how can we help in that in our home state here in Florida? Again, maybe because I'm a glass half full, that Ann didn't deflect questions, didn't say I can't say, so that I expected from the previously known as no such agency, to be so open, to mention tools that are being used. The new open source, initiative for reverse engineering malware. So what I didn't hear, was an attitude that was more common in the past.
That's great. Diane?
I think the most amazing thing is that I'm here, which is a
Yeah.
great thing for me, and because I'm so passionate about this area, and I really, really enjoy meeting people around the country. In my job, I go around the world for a lot of different opportunities around the country, and I really, really enjoyed coming here, so that was amazing for me. But talking about the speakers, I really enjoyed the part of General Nakasoni's presentation this morning about the data science and the future of AI, and then that dovetails into what I didn't hear. I thought later on in the day we might hear more about it. But with respect to the National Security Agency, always trying to stay on the cutting edge in terms of where things are going, what I didn't hear today was about, with respect to AI, the data science piece, the data sets really are going to make a difference on how AI is used in the future. And so I think that'll probably be next year's symposium, because I think that's where we're going to in terms of look at how that can actually help, bigger picture in terms of bigger data sets and how can you, dissect all of that. And the only thing I didn't also hear about was the cyber labs and our opportunity to actually do more together on shared cyber labs, because we can't all have our own cyber lab, right? And so I think that would be a significant area for us to come together and learn. It could be sector-specific cyber labs, and have people go there, and that may be where the nonprofit interlocutor concept is going, because I do think there probably is a place for that. We need that. So But overall, just fantastic meeting so many of you. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. So one small plug for Cyber Florida. So Cyber Florida does have a range environment that it uses with the state university system. And we're talking about how do we make that more accessible to the wider swath of the community. So hopefully that's a coming attraction. I didn't commit Cyber Florida to it, but Sri, where are you? Get it done. And so thanks all of you for attending. I would like to thank our panelists. Give them a round of applause. Thank you.
This has been a special two-part edition of No Password Required, recorded on location at Florida Cyber Conference 2019 in Tampa. I'm Bill McQueen. Thank you for listening.
No Password Required is a presentation of Cyber Florida, located on the Tampa campus of the University of South Florida. To hear other episodes of No Password Required, visit cyberflorida.org/podcast.